So now let's add a little bit of context to what we spoke about before. So now we've got a little bit of a bigger idea about why breathing is so important. Let's start taking a bit of a look at the basic movements that should occur when we breathe in, so in inhalation, and when we breathe out, so with exhalation. So we can get a little bit of a basic understanding about what we should be seeing happen within our bodies and the muscles that we should be using when we do those two things. Now, before I do that, allow me to share a fun little fact with you. Now, I learned this fact from Matt Walden. It is related to breathing, by the way. It's not just a random fact. He is Czech faculty, so he teaches for the Czech Institute. I have learned from him with regards to breathing and what I'm sharing with you today. And that fact was that the average person breathes between 12 to 18 times per minute. And that equates to about 25,900 breaths within a day. Interestingly enough, that is also the amount of years it takes for our sun to do one full revolution of our solar system, so one big lap of our galaxy. Now, the reason why I find this really cool is for those of you that have a keen interest in astrology, when you start looking a little bit deeper into this and the movement of planets and how long it takes them to do certain things and revolutions and this, that, and the other, there's usually often a big correlation in terms of then systems that do the same thing or the same amount of time within our own bodies. We are, of course, connected to everyone and everything, and I find that fascinating. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that interesting little tidbit as much as I did when I learnt it. So now let's get into the basic movements of inhalation. So that's what we're going to cover in this next video. So allow me to show you, obviously, my incredibly technically sound visual representation of your lungs, your ribs, and your diaphragm. Now, yes, I would be exceptionally worried if your insides looked like this and you only had 4 ribs. So let's just take it for what it is, and a nice just little visual representation to help give you a little bit of a better understanding about what should be happening. So when we breathe in, we have 2 primary movers of inhalation. So 2 things that should be doing the work, basically, that or should initiate the work when we take a big breath in. The first one is the diaphragm. So this is your diaphragm here. So what happens when we inhale is the diaphragm should descend. So the diaphragm bows down. Now, obviously, within our abdomen, we have quite a lot of organs that sit here. So as the diaphragm pushes down as you take a big deep breath in, that's going to push down on our viscera, so on our organs. Now, down here within the pelvis, we also have the pelvic floor, which is what prevents the abdominal contents from dropping down into our pelvis, because we don't want it to go there, right? So that's why we associate what we call the belly breath with diaphragmatic breathing, because your organs obviously will have nowhere to go. So as the diaphragm goes down and pushes on them, they run out of room because they get blocked by the pelvic floor. And then what happens as we breathe out, or breathe in, sorry, is then our belly moves out. Okay, so that's why we associate belly breathing with a diaphragmatic breath. The second mover is also known as the external intercostal. So they sit between the ribs, so intercostal, because costal meaning rib. We also have a secondary muscle to that called an internal intercostal, which is involved in exhalation, which we'll go through next, but that sits underneath this muscle. And then the external intercostals sit kind of on top and back up here in between the ribs. So what happens with that main movement of inhalation is as the diaphragm bows down, that increases volume within our thorax, and our external intercostals help us to expand the rib cage. With that increase of volume, up here, that decreases the pressure within our thorax, and that's what encourages that big suck in of air from outside. Now, we also have secondary movers to inhalation, which help with the lift and the expansion of the rib cage. They are muscles of the chest, so pec major, pec minor, also muscles of the neck. We've got scalenes, but also sternocleidomastoid. That's that weird little one. If you look to the side, you can kind of get hold of that weird little band of tissue there. That's that one. Serratus anterior and posterior. If you've ever seen someone who's particularly lean, they're those muscles that kind of sit down here and look like those kind of little weird feathery ones. Levator scapulae, which is at the border. So the top of our shoulder blade here runs up into our neck. And we can also recruit The upper fibers of our upper traps, that tends to happen a little bit more when we are in what we call oxygen debt. So for example, when you're in the gym and you're having a big, hard workout, you need to suck air in really, really quickly. And you'll notice that your breath, you will not be taking big, deep diaphragmatic belly breaths in that moment. You'll be taking short, sharp, shallow ones, which kind of make our ribs and our chest sort of do this. So we get that lift of that rib cage and the shoulder, but it's very shallow and it's very quick. So they tend to come in when we're in oxygen debt or when we're working hard. However, the issue we tend to have nowadays is that most people only breathe into their chest. So they are what we call chest breathers. And when they take a breath in, there's very little movement down here. And a lot of it is the expansion and the lift of the rib cage. So it's short, shallow breaths like this and or like this. And then what happens is over time, these muscles start to become very tight because they're doing all of the work of that lifting and that expansion of the rib cage, and they're not using the diaphragm to initiate the movement. So if you are someone who potentially presents with stiff and sore neck, tight upper back, kind of really tight chest all the time, then look at your breathing pattern, and we will go through that in a couple of videos time to start to see what's happening with your own body, but start to see if you can start to connect some dots here between things that are showing up in your own body and how it's presenting now, and potentially that being related to the way that you're breathing and potentially causing some dysfunction there through a dysfunctional breathing pattern.